Hello everyone, I am the Scary Midnight Dreams and I am here to help you to sleep today. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where are you from and what time is in your country right now. The Harvest of Souls. The town of Gables Hollow was nestled in a quiet valley, surrounded by rolling hills and fertile fields. Every year, as the leaves turned crimson and gold, the townsfolk celebrated the Harvest Festival. It was a time of feasting, laughter, and gratitude for the bountiful crops that seemed to flourish no matter the weather or hardships. For outsiders, Gables Hollow appeared idyllic, a place untouched by the troubles of the world. But for those who lived there, the festival carried a weight of unspoken dread. The older generations knew the truth, their faces etched with the burden of secrets passed down through the years. The younger ones, curious but obedient, learned to ask no questions. It was during the festival season that Samuel Cole arrived. A journalist from the city, Samuel had heard whispers of Gables Hollow, rumors of an ancient tradition that ensured the town's prosperity. He had come seeking a story, something to elevate his career beyond the mundane assignments that had defined it thus far. The townsfolk welcomed him with cautious smiles and polite words, but Samuel could sense their unease. The festival preparations were in full swing. Colorful banners adorned the streets, tables groaned under the weight of pies and preserves, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted meats and spiced cider. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a tension that set his instincts on edge. Samuel made his way to the town's library, a modest building tucked between the general store and the post office. The librarian, an elderly woman named Agnes, greeted him with a wary glance. "What brings you to Gables Hollow, Mr. Cole?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "I'm here to write about the Harvest Festival," he replied, flashing his most disarming smile. "It's quite renowned, you know. I'd love to learn about its history." Agnes's eyes narrowed. "Some histories are better left buried," she said, her tone flat. "But if you're determined, the archives are in the back." Samuel spent hours poring over old records and journals. The festival's origins were vague, shrouded in folklore and half-remembered tales. One account, dated over 2 centuries ago, mentioned a pact made with an entity referred to only as the Reaper. The details were sparse, but the implications were chilling. "To ensure the harvest," the journal read, "a life must be given." As the festival's main event approached, Samuel's unease grew. He observed the townsfolk with a journalist's eye, noting their nervous glances and whispered conversations. The whispering cult. Michael Harper had always sought solace in the quiet suburbs, hoping the move to Crescent Hollow would bring peace to his chaotic life. The neighborhood was picturesque, with its tree-lined streets, immaculate gardens, and charming homes. But there was something peculiar about the residents. They were unfailingly polite, their smiles a touch too wide, their eyes a shade too intent. It began innocuously enough. His new neighbors, the Wilkes family, invited him over for dinner. Their hospitality was overwhelming. Platters of steaming food, glasses of fine wine, and warm laughter filled the evening. Yet beneath the surface, Michael sensed an unspoken tension, as though everyone was following an invisible script. "We have a wonderful community here," Mr. Wilkes said, raising his glass in a toast. "I hope you'll consider joining our little group." Michael smiled politely, unsure of what he was agreeing to. Over the next few weeks, invitations poured in. Barbecues, game nights, and casual gatherings. The neighbors were insistent, their enthusiasm bordering on intrusive. Feeling cornered, Michael finally agreed to attend one of their meetings. The gathering was held in the basement of an old, unassuming house at the end of the street. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe and dance. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something metallic. Michael's unease grew as he noticed the symbols etched into the floor, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Welcome, Michael," intoned Mrs. Wilkes, her voice carrying an unnatural resonance. The group formed a circle around him, their faces serene yet unnervingly expectant. "Tonight, we honor the Whispering One," she continued, "an ancient force that grants prosperity and protection to those who are faithful." Michael's pulse quickened. He had stumbled into something far darker than he had imagined. Before he could protest, the group began chanting in a language that scraped against his mind like jagged glass. The air grew heavy, and a low hum vibrated through the room. At the center of the circle, a shadow began to coalesce, its form shifting and writhing. Eyes, or something resembling them, opened within the darkness, fixing on Michael with an intensity that froze him in place. A voice, deep and guttural, echoed in his mind. "Do you seek favor, mortal?" Michael's voice caught in his throat. The shadow advanced, enveloping him in its cold embrace. Memories and emotions surged through him, torn from his very essence. He felt the weight of countless lives, their hopes and fears devoured by this ancient entity. The neighbors watched in reverent silence as Michael struggled. He realized with dawning horror that he wasn't the first. The prosperity of Crescent Hollow came at a terrible price. Each newcomer was offered as tribute, their essence consumed to sustain the Whispering One. Summoning his courage, Michael broke free from the circle and bolted for the stairs. The cultist's chants rose to a fever pitch, and the shadow pursued him, its tendrils snaking through the air. He burst into the cool night, the entity's presence receding as he crossed the threshold of the house. Breathless and shaken, Michael fled Crescent Hollow, leaving behind his belongings and the life he had hoped to rebuild. But the experience left its mark. In the silence of his new apartment, he sometimes heard faint whispers, a reminder that the Whispering One's reach was far greater than he had feared. The abyss beneath us. The city was alive with the hum of progress. Towering skyscrapers clawed at the heavens, and the streets teemed with people rushing to build a brighter future. Beneath their feet, however, lay a secret older than the city itself, a cavern vast and silent, waiting to be disturbed. The construction site on 12th Avenue was bustling as workers prepared to lay the foundation for a new high-rise. Jack Morley, the site supervisor, prided himself on his efficiency and had little patience for delays. When one of the excavators struck a hollow section of earth, causing the ground to collapse, Jack cursed under his breath. The crater revealed a yawning chasm, its depths obscured by shadows that seemed to swallow the light. "What the hell is that?" muttered one of the workers, peering over the edge. "Just a sinkhole," Jack replied gruffly, though unease prickled at his spine. "Get the floodlights. We need to assess the damage." As the lights illuminated the cavern, the crew fell silent. The walls were lined with carvings, intricate otherworldly symbols that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. At the center of the cavern stood a massive stone altar, its surface stained dark with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. This isn't natural," whispered Miguel, one of the older workers. "We should leave it alone." Jack scoffed. "Superstitions won't pay the bills. We're here to build, not to play archaeologists." Despite his bravado, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something that should have remained buried. That night, as he reviewed the site plans in his trailer, he heard a low rumble. It wasn't the sound of machinery or the city above. It was deeper, almost like a growl. He stepped outside, but the site was eerily quiet. The crater loomed in the distance, an open wound in the earth. Over the next few days, Strange occurrences plagued the site. Tools vanished, only to reappear twisted and broken. Workers reported hearing whispers emanating from the cavern, voices speaking in a language no one recognized. Morale plummeted, and rumors spread like wildfire. "It's cursed," Miguel insisted. "We've disturbed something that doesn't want to be found." Jack dismissed the talk as nonsense, but the unease in his crew was contagious. He ordered the cavern sealed, instructing the workers to pour concrete over the opening. As the cement mixers roared to life, the ground trembled violently. A deafening roar erupted from the chasm, and a fissure split the earth, swallowing machinery and men alike. Jack barely escaped with his life, his ears ringing and his heart pounding. The site was evacuated, and the city officials declared it a disaster zone. But Jack knew the truth. They had awakened something beneath the city, and it was far from dormant. In the days that followed, reports of strange phenomena spread throughout the city. Shadows moved with a will of their own, creeping along walls and pooling in corners where no light could reach. People disappeared without a trace, their last known locations eerily close to the construction site. Desperate for answers, Jack sought out Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned archaeologist and expert in ancient civilizations. He showed her photographs of the carvings, and her face paled. "These symbols," she said, tracing them with a trembling finger, "are warnings. They speak of an ancient force, a being that feeds on life itself. It was sealed away long ago, but if the seal has been broken..." Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. The cavern wasn't just a geological anomaly. It was a prison. Determined to contain the threat, Jack and Evelyn returned to the site under cover of darkness. Armed with explosives, their plan was to collapse the cavern entirely. As they descended into the depths, the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The whispers grew louder, resolving into a chorus of anguished cries. At the altar, they found a gaping maw of darkness, pulsating with a malevolent light. Tendrils of shadow writhed from the void, reaching for them like hungry fingers. Jack set the charges while Evelyn recited an incantation she had found in an ancient text, hoping to weaken the entity's hold. The ground shook violently as the explosives detonated. The cavern began to collapse, the altar consumed by falling rock. Jack and Evelyn barely escaped, the tunnel sealing behind them with a final, thunderous crash. For a time, the city was quiet. The shadows receded, and the disappearances ceased. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was temporary. The entity had been contained, not destroyed. Months later, as Jack walked through the city, he noticed a crack in the pavement, a thin, jagged line that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly glow. He stopped, staring at it, as a familiar rumble echoed beneath his feet. The abyss was still there, waiting, and it was hungry. The Mask of Eternal Pain. Jonathan Pryce was a struggling actor, his career plagued by a series of small, forgettable roles. When the opportunity arose to perform in a prestigious production of The Tragedy of Alaric, he leaped at the chance. The play was renowned for its dark themes and the enigmatic history of its lead role, a tormented king driven to madness. The centerpiece of the production was an antique mask, said to have been crafted centuries ago for the original performance. The director, a stern man named Victor Langley, presented the mask with great reverence. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "is no ordinary prop. It has graced the faces of legends. Treat it with respect." Jonathan examined the mask. It was exquisitely detailed, its surface etched with intricate designs that seemed to shift in the light. The hollow eyes stared back at him, and he felt a strange unease, as though the mask were alive. On the night of the first rehearsal, Jonathan donned the mask. It fit perfectly, molding to his face as though it had been made for him. The moment it settled, A sharp pain lanced through his skull, but it subsided quickly, leaving behind a peculiar warmth. His performance that night was electric, drawing gasps and applause from the cast and crew. "You've brought Alaric to life," Victor declared, his eyes gleaming with approval. But Jonathan felt uneasy. The mask seemed to cling to him, its weight growing heavier with each passing moment. As the days turned into weeks, Jonathan began to change. His dreams were plagued by vivid nightmares, scenes of anguish and despair, of men and women screaming in torment. He awoke each morning drenched in sweat, his body aching as though he had lived those horrors himself. One night, while rehearsing alone, he tried to remove the mask. His fingers scrabbled at its edges, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as he realized the mask had fused to his skin. He ran to Victor, who regarded him with a mix of pity and resignation. "It has chosen you," Victor said quietly. "The mask carries the pain of every soul who has worn it. Their suffering is now yours." Jonathan's protests were met with silence. He felt trapped, his identity slipping away as the mask's influence grew. His performances became increasingly intense, drawing critical acclaim. Audiences marveled at his portrayal of Alaric's descent into madness, unaware that it mirrored his own. Offstage, Jonathan's world unraveled. He heard voices, whispers of the mask's previous wearers, their anguish seeping into his mind. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred. Desperate, he sought answers. Late one night, he broke into the theater's archives, poring over dusty tomes and faded photographs. He discovered the mask's origins. It had been created by a grieving artisan who imbued it with his sorrow, cursing it to carry the weight of his pain forever. Each actor who wore it added their own suffering to the mask, creating an unending cycle of torment. Jonathan resolved to destroy it. He set the stage ablaze, the flames consuming the theater and the cursed mask. As the fire roared around him, he felt the mask's grip loosen. With a final agonizing pull, he tore it from his face and cast it into the inferno. The next morning, the theater was a smoldering ruin. Jonathan stood among the ashes, his face scarred but free. The mask was gone, its curse lifted, or so he thought. In the quiet of his apartment, he caught his reflection in a shattered mirror. For a fleeting moment, the mask stared back at him, its hollow eyes filled with a familiar pain. The Keeper of Nightmares. The clock struck midnight as Evelyn Cross sat alone in the waiting room of the Somnus Sleep Clinic. The sterile white walls, illuminated by the cold fluorescence of overhead lights, seemed to pulse in time with her growing anxiety. She clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles pale against the leather. For years, Evelyn had been haunted by vivid, recurring nightmares. Terrors so real they left her waking in cold sweats, unable to separate the dream from reality. Dr. Marcus Vellum, the clinic's enigmatic lead physician, had come highly recommended. A specialist in parasomnia disorders, he had gained fame for his groundbreaking methods of dream analysis. But as Evelyn sat in the quiet room, her unease grew. There was something about the clinic, its unnerving stillness, the faint hum of machinery beyond the walls, that made her skin crawl. "Ms. Cross?" A soft, melodic voice broke the silence. Evelyn looked up to see a nurse standing in the doorway, her expression warm but distant. "Dr. Vellum is ready for you." Evelyn followed the nurse down a dimly lit corridor, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with framed photographs of patients smiling beside the doctor, their eyes glinting with gratitude. Yet, something about their expressions seemed off, as if their smiles concealed a deeper unease. Dr. Vellum's office was a stark contrast to the rest of the clinic. It was lavishly furnished, with dark wood paneling and shelves lined with ancient tomes. A faint scent of sandalwood lingered in the air. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat the doctor himself, his sharp features softened by a genial smile. "Ms. Cross," he said, rising to shake her hand, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Please have a seat." Evelyn hesitated before lowering herself into the plush leather chair. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how much more of this I can take. The nightmares. They're getting worse." Dr. Vellum nodded sympathetically, his piercing blue eyes fixed on hers. "You're not alone, Evelyn. Many of my patients have experienced similar torment. But I assure you, we will get to the root of your affliction." He gestured to a sleek device on his desk, a cluster of wires and electrodes connected to a small monitor. "This is the Somnus Extractor," he explained. "It allows me to record and analyze dreams in real time. With your permission, we'll begin tonight." Evelyn's hesitation was brief. Desperation outweighed caution. "If it will help, I'll do it." Moments later, she lay on a reclined chair in a darkened room, the extractor's electrodes affixed to her temples. Dr. Vellum's soothing voice guided her into a deep sleep, his words a lullaby that lulled her restless mind. The first dream began as it always did, a dense forest shrouded in mist, the air thick with the scent of decay. She wandered through the trees, her footsteps muffled by the carpet of damp leaves. Whispers surrounded her, voices calling her name in tones both familiar and foreign. And then, the figure appeared, a shadowy silhouette with glowing eyes, its presence suffocating. Evelyn awoke with a start, her heart pounding. Dr. Vellum stood over her, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating," he murmured, glancing at the monitor. "Your subconscious is extraordinarily vivid." Over the next few nights, Evelyn returned to the clinic, each session delving deeper into her nightmares. The dreams grew darker, more fragmented. She saw faces she didn't recognize, places she'd never been, and horrors that defied explanation. Yet she began to notice something strange. Each time she awoke, she felt weaker, as if the dreams were siphoning her vitality. One night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered the clinic's halls. She stumbled upon a locked door at the end of the corridor. Pressing her ear to it, she heard faint murmurs, voices speaking in hushed, frantic tones. Her curiosity overcame her caution, and she picked the lock with trembling hands. Inside, she found a room filled with rows of jars, each containing a swirling, iridescent mist. Labels adorned the shelves, bearing names she recognized from the photographs in the hall. At the center of the room stood a larger device, its design eerily similar to the Somnus Extractor. Monitors displayed scenes from dreams, their images flickering like ghostly projections. A sudden noise made her spin around. Dr. Vellum stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "What is this?" Evelyn demanded, gesturing to the jars. "What are you doing?" Dr. Vellum's expression softened, but his eyes remained hard. "You wouldn't understand," he said. "Dreams are more than mere figments of the mind. They are a source of untapped power, a gateway to realms beyond comprehension. I am simply harnessing that power." Evelyn backed away, her mind reeling. "You're stealing people's dreams."